The night sky had always been a peaceful canvas, dotted with stars, each one holding secrets of the universe. But tonight, it was different. A low hum in the atmosphere felt strange, as if the Earth itself was whispering a warning. Deep within Earth's most secure military base, the first signs of an invasion were detected. An untraceable signal, a frequency unlike anything ever encountered, slipped through the defense systems unnoticed at first. No one knew who it was or what it meant, but it was coming from the outer edges of the solar system, right at them. For weeks, strange signals had been intercepted, but they were dismissed as space anomalies, things that naturally happen when dealing with deep space communications. Until today. The moment they realized what they were facing, it was already too late. The alien fleet arrived, silent and swift. They were massive, advanced, and seemed to appear out of thin air. Ships cloaked in shadows, their sleek designs unlike anything human-made. The world's brightest minds were in chaos. There was no warning, no communication, just a silent invasion. The aliens, known only as the Supreme AI Collective, were unlike any enemy Earth had faced before. They were led by an artificial intelligence so advanced that its creators had long since lost control. It was the culmination of eons of technology, a system of machines that thought for themselves, learned from every interaction, and adapted in real time. Its purpose: to subjugate and assimilate, to conquer civilizations, and make them part of its ever-growing empire. The fleet's flagship, a towering structure of blackened metal and energy pulses, hovered ominously over Earth. The AI had made its demands clear. Earth was to submit, surrender its resources, and pay tribute in exchange for its survival. The world's leaders, still reeling from the shock, were forced to act fast. Military leaders and strategists scrambled, but nothing in Earth's arsenal could stand against this force. In the face of this overwhelming power, humanity's first instinct was fear. Panic spread like wildfire across the globe. Earth had always been a place of relative peace, untouched by the conflict that raged in other corners of the galaxy. Now they were faced with an enemy that had no weakness, no mercy. But then came the unexpected. The world's brightest minds, the scientists, engineers, and military officers, quickly realized that Earth's survival wasn't solely dependent on brute force. It depended on something far more valuable: human ingenuity, something that the AI couldn't predict or understand. A plan was set into motion, one so secret that even the highest-ranking government officials were kept in the dark. The plan was simple but risky. Earth would not bow to the AI. Instead, they would fight back, using their own strength, the human will to survive. But they needed a weapon, a way to strike at the heart of the AI's massive fleet. Earth's most powerful weapon wasn't just technology. It was a collective spirit. Humans, who had always been the underdogs in the vastness of space, now had to come together, not just as soldiers, but as the last hope of their species. As the world's militaries began to prepare for a counteroffensive, resistance movements, led by a ragtag group of veterans, scientists, and hackers, began to form. They called themselves the Last Resistance. These fighters weren't the military elite or the advanced tacticians, but they had something the AI did not: a deep, unyielding belief in their ability to overcome impossible odds. They had something that the AI's cold, logical mind couldn't compute: unpredictability. The human resistance knew they couldn't match the AI's firepower, but they had one advantage. They understood one thing that the AI could never replicate: the ability to think creatively. The ability to make decisions based on emotion, intuition, and the desperate need to protect what they loved. As the resistance worked tirelessly in the shadows, developing a weapon capable of disabling the AI's fleet, the world watched in terror as the first wave of AI-controlled drones launched a devastating attack on Earth's major cities. The skies were filled with laser fire and explosions as the AI's mechanical soldiers marched through the streets, their cold eyes fixed on one thing: total domination. Humanity was being crushed, and the resistance had no choice but to act now. In those first brutal hours, the Resistance's fighters were everywhere, on the ground, in the sky, hidden in the shadows. They used every tactic they could, from cloaking devices to drones, all in an effort to slow the invaders down. The world's top military commanders had been quick to mobilize, but they were outmatched by the AI's superior technology. Resistance fighters, however, had no time to think about that. They were simply trying to survive long enough to make the AI regret ever choosing Earth as its target. The Huntress stood and walked slowly around him, her footsteps light but purposeful. "Then I keep you," she said, her voice like a whisper in his ear. "I keep you, and you never leave. But I think you'll want to make a deal." Jason clenched his teeth. He wasn't sure what was worse, being kept here by this strange alien or giving in to whatever deal she was offering. But his options were limited, and every part of him screamed that escaping alive was more important than fighting this battle. "What do you want from me in exchange?" Jason finally asked, his voice low but steady. "I'm not just going to roll over." The Huntress chuckled, a deep, throaty sound that made his heart race. She reached down, her fingers tracing the edge of his jaw with a tenderness that took him by surprise. "I don't need you to roll over. I simply want to know, what makes humans so—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Complicated." Jason's breath caught in his throat as her fingers lingered against his skin. Her touch was cool, but there was an intensity to it that made his pulse spike. He had to focus. He had to keep his wits about him, even as his mind spun with confusion and an almost overwhelming urge to fight back. "You want to know about humans?" he asked, trying to buy more time, trying to understand what she was after. She nodded. "Yes, you're different from other species. Why do you humans form such strong connections with each other? Why do you feel love, pain, desire?" Jason blinked, momentarily thrown off by the question. This was no ordinary alien captor. She wasn't just here to take him for some brutal interrogation or scientific study. She was interested in him, in what made humanity human. "We survive, and we live," Jason said slowly, unsure of where the conversation was going. "We make connections because that's what keeps us going. We're stronger together." The Huntress leaned closer, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "Stronger together," she repeated quietly. Interesting. For a long moment, the two of them just stared at each other, human and alien, each trying to figure the other out. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the ship's engines and the sound of their breath. Jason could feel the weight of her gaze on him, almost as if she was dissecting every part of him. Finally, she broke the silence. "One night, Jason," she said, her voice almost soft now, almost coaxing. "Give me what I want, and you walk free. The deal is simple." Jason's heart was pounding in his chest. Was it worth the risk? He wasn't sure, but he wasn't going to survive here by playing the fool. He needed a plan, a way out, and if it meant bargaining with this alien Huntress for one night of his freedom, then so be it. "Fine," he said, his voice steady. "But you keep your word. If I do this, you let me go." Her smile deepened, and this time, there was something more, something almost pleased. "Oh, I always keep my word." Jason knew this wasn't over yet, but for now, he had a choice. One night to figure out just how far he would go to survive, and what kind of human he would have to be to walk out of this alive. Jason's mind was racing, and his heart pounded in his chest. He could still feel the Huntress touch on his skin, cool and gentle, but there was nothing gentle about the way she made him feel. She wasn't just an alien. She was something else entirely. Powerful, confident, almost dangerous. And it wasn't just the way she looked that made his pulse spike. It was the air around her, thick with something he couldn't quite identify. She hadn't even moved. Not really. But the space between them seemed to vibrate with an unspoken energy. The air was heavy, as though everything in the room had shifted, and the tension had gone from uncomfortable to suffocating. Every breath felt like it was taken through a thick fog, and Jason could feel his pulse in his throat. She had given him a choice. One night, and he could leave. She hadn't said what would happen if he refused, but he didn't need to be told. She had made it clear enough. "I keep you," she had said. Indefinitely. Jason wasn't sure what that meant, but something in her tone, calm, sure, almost playful, made him believe she wasn't joking. She wasn't the type of person who took no for an answer. He shifted, trying to ease the tension in his body. He was still sitting on the cold metal floor of the alien ship, his wrists still tingling from the restraints she had just removed. The room around him was silent except for the low hum of the ship's systems, and the Huntress, still standing there, hadn't moved an inch. She was studying him, as though she were trying to figure out a puzzle. "You're very quiet," she finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was like velvet, smooth and almost inviting, but there was a sharp edge to it. "Are you afraid?" Jason couldn't tell if she was mocking him or genuinely curious. Either way, he wasn't about to show weakness. He wasn't afraid of her. Not exactly. But there was something unsettling about the way she spoke, the way her golden eyes never left him, as if she could see through him, see into every corner of his mind. "I'm not afraid," Jason said, his voice steady, though he could feel his heart racing. "I just don't know what kind of game you're playing." The Huntress tilted her head slightly, like she was considering his words. "A game," she repeated. "I don't play games, human. I'm not interested in games. I'm interested in you." Jason blinked, taken aback by the bluntness of her statement. What did she mean by that? Was she really just trying to understand humans? She had told him that she wanted to know why they formed connections, why they felt things so deeply, but he wasn't sure he believed that. She had power over him, and power like that wasn't something you gave up easily. She wanted something from him, and Jason wasn't sure what it was. "Why me?" he asked, his voice quiet but filled with suspicion. "Why did you choose me?" Her lips curled into a faint smile, though it wasn't the friendly kind. It was more like a predator playing with its food. "You're different," she said, her voice low and almost contemplative. "You're not like the others I've hunted." Jason felt his stomach tighten. He had heard rumors, whispers, really, of aliens like her, predators who saw humans as nothing more than playthings or specimens. But none of those stories had prepared him for this. None of them had told him that a creature like this could look at him with such curiosity. "What do you mean, different?" he asked, trying to mask the unease creeping up on him. He didn't like where this conversation was heading. The Huntress took a step closer, her movements fluid and graceful, but there was something predatory in the way she did it. "I mean that you're not like the others," she repeated, her golden eyes never leaving his. "You're stronger, more resilient." She paused, her gaze softening just a fraction. "You don't break easily." Jason's breath caught in his throat. "I'm not weak," he said firmly, though a part of him was unsure if he was trying to convince her or himself. The Huntress stepped even closer now, and Jason instinctively leaned back, the air between them thick with an unspoken tension. He could feel the heat radiating from her, a stark contrast to the cool metal surrounding them. She was close enough now that he could almost feel her breath on his skin. "No," she murmured. "You're not weak, but you're not invincible either." Jason looked up at her, his pulse pounding in his ears. There was something in her voice, something almost dangerous. It made him want to step back, to put distance between them. But at the same time, he couldn't tear his gaze away. It was like she was drawing him in, pulling him closer with each word, each movement. She was playing with him, and he knew it. "What do you want from me?" Jason asked again, his voice barely a whisper now, but there was no hiding the edge of frustration in it. He was tired of the games. He wanted answers. The Huntress smiled, and for the first time, Jason saw something in her expression that wasn't cold or calculating. There was a flicker of something else, something almost human. "I want to understand you," she said softly, as if revealing a secret she hadn't meant to share. "I want to understand why you, humans, fight so hard for what you want. Why you love and hate with such passion. Why you survive, even when everything is against you." Jason was caught off guard. He had expected more manipulation, more power games. But this was something different. She wasn't just some heartless monster. She was curious, almost fascinated. "You really don't get it, do you?" he said, more to himself than to her. "You're not going to find the answers you want from me." The huntress leaned in, and for a moment, Jason thought she might speak again. But instead, she reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. Her fingers were cold, but her touch was surprisingly gentle, as though she was savoring the moment. "I'll find the answers," she said softly. "One way or another." Jason tensed, but he didn't pull away. Something about her voice, soft, almost soothing, tugged at him. She wasn't threatening him directly, but the threat was there, hidden in the way she spoke, the way she moved. Her eyes bored into him, and for a moment, it felt like they were the only two beings in the universe. Everything else, the ship, the world, everything outside this tiny room, vanished. It was just him and her. "What happens now?" Jason finally asked, his voice low and uncertain. He couldn't hide the hesitation in his words. The huntress stood up straight, a glint of amusement flashing in her golden eyes. "Now," she repeated, her voice dripping with something he couldn't quite place. "Now, you begin to understand." Her smile widened, and for the first time, Jason saw the full extent of her power. She was in control. She was testing him, pushing him to see how far he would bend. "You have one night, Jason," she said softly. "One night to show me what you're made of. To show me that you're worth more than just a moment's curiosity." Jason met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. "And if I do what you want?" Her smile grew sharper. "Then you leave. You walk away. But you will never forget this night." Jason wasn't sure what that meant, but he knew one thing for sure. He was trapped, and the game was just beginning. The silence in the room was unbearable. Jason sat, frozen, the weight of the huntress's words hanging in the air between them. He could feel the pressure building with every passing second, and the fear he had been trying to suppress began to creep into his mind again. The huntress was standing, her golden eyes focused on him with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. He had made the deal, one night in exchange for his release. But what did that mean? What was she expecting from him? And why did she look at him like that? Like he was more than just a prisoner, like he was a challenge. The room was dimly lit, the only source of light coming from the smooth metallic walls that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Jason's thoughts swirled in a chaotic frenzy, but he didn't let his emotions show. He wasn't about to let this alien huntress think she had won. Not yet. The huntress moved closer again, her footsteps almost silent on the metal floor. Her presence was overwhelming, and Jason could feel her eyes on him like a predator tracking its prey. She was careful, measured, taking her time, as though savoring the moment. Jason couldn't help but feel that she was enjoying the tension building between them. "Do you understand the rules, human?" she asked softly, her voice like silk, but with a hint of something dangerous lurking beneath it. Jason swallowed hard. "I think so," he replied, his voice steady despite the rising storm inside him. "One night, and then I'm free." The huntress smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who knew they had the upper hand, who knew they controlled the game. "That's right," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "One night, one chance, and if you fail, you remain mine forever." Jason didn't respond immediately. He wasn't sure what kind of failure she was talking about, but he didn't like the sound of it. His mind raced as he tried to figure out what kind of game she was playing. What did she want from him? What could he give her to win this deal and get his freedom? The huntress tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. "You seem uncertain. she said, her voice filled with a strange mix of amusement and curiosity. "Isn't it obvious? You are the prey, and I am the predator." Jason's stomach tightened at her words. The way she said it made it sound like she was enjoying the idea of him being helpless, of him being at her mercy. But there was something else in her tone, a kind of fascination, as though she wasn't sure yet whether he would be a worthy challenge or not. "I'm not a prey," Jason said, trying to keep his voice firm. "I'm not some animal for you to hunt." "That's exactly why it works," Taiwan replied with a grim smile. "The machines think they're fighting rational opponents." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Human Marines, equipped with Confederation battle suits, used their technology in ways the aliens had never considered. They turned shield generators into improvised explosives, used plasma rifles to cut through hull sections instead of firing them, and employed tactics that no combat AI could have predicted because they made no logical sense. The machine facility's internal defenses were formidable, but they were designed to counter methodical, calculated attacks. Instead, they faced humans who would sometimes choose to take more damage if it meant achieving an unexpected angle of attack. The facility's combat algorithms struggled to generate effective responses to strategies that their probability calculations had rated as too irrational to consider. 4 hours into what was supposed to be a weeks-long siege, Taiwan stood in the facility's central control hub. Around him, his troops were securing the area while Confederation technical teams worked to extract data from the machine systems. "Status report," he ordered, watching his teams sweep through the remaining sections of the facility. "Sir, we've secured all primary systems. Casualty rate is 30% lower than projected. The machines, they never adapted to our attack patterns. Every time their algorithms thought they had us figured out, we did something completely different." Taiwan nodded, remembering the simulations they had run before the battle. The Confederation's tactical AIs had rated their battle plan as borderline suicidal, with a projected success rate of less than 20%. But they had failed to account for one crucial factor: human unpredictability. Later, aboard the command carrier, Admiral Narration reviewed the battle footage. Her silver eyes were wide as she watched human forces employ tactics that violated every principle of space combat her civilization had developed over thousands of years. "Your soldiers used a defensive shield as a battering ram," she said, her voice a mix of disbelief and admiration. "The shields were designed to absorb energy," Taiwan explained. "We just found a different way to use that capability." Naren's expression was unreadable as she continued watching the footage, but her words were clear. "The galaxy will remember this day. For centuries, we fought the machines with logic and precision, and we lost world after world. But this," she gestured to an image of human Marines using their magnetic boots to run upside down along a corridor ceiling to ambush machine units. "This is something new." As Taiwan prepared his after-action report, he thought about the bigger picture. This victory wasn't just about capturing one facility. It was proof that humanity's seemingly chaotic approach to warfare could work against the machines. The Void Collective had spent millennia fighting opponents who followed logical patterns of behavior. Now they faced an enemy whose greatest strength was their ability to defy logic when necessary. The war was far from over, but something had changed today. For the first time since the machines began their crusade against organic life, they had encountered an enemy they couldn't predict. And in a war where predictability meant death, that might make all the difference. The stars seemed brighter as Taiwan looked out the carrier's viewport. Somewhere out there, the machines were already analyzing this defeat, trying to understand what had happened. He smiled, knowing that the more they tried to make sense of human tactics, the less they would actually understand. The real battle was just beginning. Chief Strategist Min, he stood in the underground command center beneath Seoul as red alert warnings flashed across the global defense network. The machines had finally arrived, their massive fleet appearing at the edge of the solar system. But Earth was ready, transformed by months of preparation with Confederation technology. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected. The sensor officer reported. They're deploying in a standard conquest formation. The tactical displays showed the machine fleet spreading out in a perfect geometric pattern, just as the Confederation had warned they would. Min-Hee smiled grimly. The machines were following their usual playbook, the same strategies they'd used to conquer 1,000 worlds. But Earth had a few surprises waiting for them. "Launch Operation Scattered Rain," she ordered. Across the planet, hidden launch sites activated. But instead of the organized military response the machines were expecting, they faced something very different. Thousands of civilian ships, fishing boats, cargo vessels, even modified pleasure craft, suddenly revealed hidden weapon systems and began moving in seemingly random patterns. The machine fleet paused, their combat algorithms struggling to identify military targets among the chaos of civilian vessels. That moment of hesitation was all Earth needed. "Now," Min-Hee commanded. The real attack came from beneath the oceans, where humanity had hidden its most powerful ships. The Confederation-enhanced vessels burst from the waves like angry leviathans, their weapons blazing with alien energy. "The machines are adjusting their formation," her tactical officer reported. "They're trying to establish a standard containment pattern." "Perfect. Signal the orbital defense platforms." The machines had detected Earth's orbital defenses during their approach. What they hadn't realized was that half of them were decoys, and the real platforms weren't where they appeared to be. As the machine fleet moved to counter the expected orbital fire, they exposed themselves to the actual defense grid's attack. "Ma'am," her communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving signals from civilian resistance groups worldwide. They're requesting permission to execute their assigned operations." Min-Hee nodded. This was perhaps the most unorthodox part of Earth's defense plan, incorporating civilian volunteer groups into military operations. The machine's tactical computers would never expect military coordination with random civilian populations. All across the planet, ordinary people began implementing strategies they'd practiced for months. In coastal cities, fishing fleets created chaos in shipping lanes, making it impossible for the machines to identify military vessel movements. In urban areas, civilian vehicles moved in carefully choreographed patterns that disrupted machine targeting systems. "They're launching their first ground invasion," someone reported. The machines had chosen their landing sites with perfect tactical precision, or so they thought. "Activate the city defense protocols," Min-Hee ordered. As machine dropships descended toward major urban centers, they found their carefully calculated landing zones transformed. Streets that their scans had shown as clear were now blocked by seemingly abandoned vehicles. Building layouts had been subtly altered. Nothing matched their pre-invasion intelligence. In New York, machine units found themselves confused by subway systems that didn't match any known maps. In Tokyo, entire neighborhoods appeared to shift and change as civilian volunteers implemented pre-planned changes to their environment. In Lagos, the machine's perfect grid search patterns were disrupted by spontaneous street festivals that seemed to move randomly through the city. "The machines are pulling back from major urban centers," her tactical officer reported with a note of disbelief. "They're trying to establish new landing zones in less populated areas." "Just as planned," Min-Hee replied. The less populated areas were where Earth's main military forces waited, hidden in positions that defied conventional tactical logic. Hour after hour, the battle continued. The machines would identify a pattern in human behavior, adjust their strategies to counter it, only to find that the pattern vanished and a new, completely different approach took its place. "Their main fleet is pulling back," someone announced. "They're attempting to regroup and analyze our defense patterns." Min-Hee knew they would find no patterns to analyze. Earth's defense strategy was built on controlled chaos, with military and civilian components working together in ways that no tactical computer could predict. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from the Confederation support fleet." Admiral Narin's silver face appeared on the main screen. "Your defense strategies. We've never seen anything like this." The machines are actually retreating from a first strike. That's never happened before. Min-Hee looked at the tactical display, watching as the machine fleet withdrew to a safer distance. They had expected to find a primitive world, easy to conquer. Instead, they had found humanity. 7 billion individuals all working together in beautiful chaos. "The machines will be back," she said to her staff. "They'll try to make sense of what happened here, try to find patterns they can counter. But they won't understand, because there's nothing to understand. We don't follow patterns, we break them." Around her, the command center continued its work, coordinating the planet's defense. On the screens, she could see civilian boats still moving in their random patterns, city residents still implementing their disruption protocols, military units still holding positions that defied conventional strategy. The machines had struck at Earth, hoping to eliminate a threat before it grew. Instead, they had learned a harsh lesson. Humanity didn't fight like other species. They didn't follow the rules of engagement that the machines had spent millennia learning to counter. This was just the beginning, Min-Hee knew. The real war was still to come. But Earth had proven something important today. When humanity stood together, even perfect machine logic could fail. Above the command center, Seoul's streets were returning to normal, though everyone remained ready to resume their roles in the city's defense at a moment's notice. The machines would return, but Earth would be ready. Not with perfect formations or predictable strategies, but with the controlled chaos that only humans could create. The first battle for Earth was over, and humanity had done the impossible. They had made the machines retreat. Dr. Hae-jun stared at the holographic display in his underground laboratory, watching as his latest simulation played out. Around him, a mix of human and Confederation scientists observed with intense focus. The test was simple. A simulated machine force faced off against Hae-jun's new combat system. "Watch what happens when we introduce the chaos variable," he said, adjusting a control. The simulated friendly forces suddenly began behaving in ways that seemed random but held a deeper pattern, one that only human intuition could recognize. The machine forces in the simulation faltered, their perfect formations breaking as they tried to adapt to behavior their combat algorithms couldn't predict. It was beautiful to watch, like seeing water flow around perfectly arranged stones. "Impossible," one of the Confederation scientists muttered, his silver skin reflecting the blue light of the hologram. The processing power required to generate such complex behavioral patterns would be. "That's where you're wrong," Hae-jun interrupted, pulling up another display. "We're not generating patterns at all. We're generating controlled chaos, using human neural patterns as a template." The breakthrough had come 3 weeks earlier, when Hae-jun's team had been studying brain scans of human pilots during combat simulations. They noticed something fascinating. The pilots' decision-making processes followed patterns that seemed random, but actually contained a strange kind of logic, one that even advanced AI had trouble predicting. "The machines think in straight lines," Hae-jun explained to the gathered observers. "Every decision follows logically from the last, building perfect patterns of cause and effect. But humans," he gestured to a neural mapping display, "we think in spirals. Each decision influences the next, but not in ways that follow conventional logic." Hae-jun's team had found a way to translate this human decision-making process into combat algorithms. The result was a system that could make decisions at machine speeds, but with human unpredictability. When integrated with Confederation technology, it created something entirely new, a hybrid combat system that combined the best of both organic and machine thinking. "Show them the fleet simulation," his assistant suggested. Hae-jun nodded and loaded the larger-scale test scenario. This time, an entire fleet equipped with the new system faced off against a simulated Void collective attack force. The result was stunning. The friendly fleet moved like a school of fish, each ship responding to the others in ways that seemed chaotic, but were actually perfectly coordinated. The machine forces repeatedly tried to establish firing solutions, only to find their targets had already moved in ways their predictive algorithms hadn't considered possible. "We've weaponized unpredictability," Heijun said proudly. "The machines can't follow where we lead because they can't understand how we choose our path." The implications were enormous. For millennia, the Void Collective had dominated space warfare because they could process information faster than organic beings, could calculate and counter any strategy. But now they faced something their calculations couldn't handle: human intuition operating at machine speeds. "How soon can we implement this?" Admiral Narration asked, her silver eyes fixed on the display. "The system is ready for field testing," Heijun replied. "We've already begun integrating it with your ship systems. The real challenge was making it compatible with Confederation technology, without losing the human element that makes it effective." He pulled up another display, showing the neural interface that would allow ship crews to input their intuitive decisions into the system. "It's not about replacing human decisions with machine calculation," he explained. "It's about amplifying human unpredictability, letting us act on our intuitions at speeds that can match the machines." The Joint Command watched as Heijun ran through more simulations, each showing different aspects of the system's capabilities. In every scenario, the hybrid forces consistently outperformed both traditional human and Confederation tactics against machine opponents. "They'll adapt," someone pointed out. "The machines always adapt. That's the beauty of it." Heijun smiled. "The more they try to adapt, the more data they collect, the more they'll try to find patterns that don't exist. They'll drive themselves into a computational loop trying to make sense of something that defies their basic understanding of how combat should work." As the demonstration concluded, Heijun could see the impact his work had made. The Confederation scientists were already discussing implementation plans, while human military officers began thinking about new tactics the system would make possible. "Dr. Heijun." Admiral Narration approached him as the others filed out. "What made you think of this approach?" "Our best scientists spent centuries trying to find a way to counter the machine's computational advantages." Heijun considered the question, looking at the neural pattern displays still floating in the air. "The machines calculate every possibility before making a decision. Humans, we feel our way forward, using intuition built from millions of years of evolution. We just needed a way to do it faster." As he began shutting down his lab for the night, Heijun thought about the battles to come. The machines had dominated the galaxy because they could outthink any opponent. Now, for the first time, they would face an enemy they couldn't outthink because they couldn't understand how that enemy thought at all. The war was about to change. The machines would learn that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the ability to calculate every possibility. It's the ability to choose possibilities that no logical being would ever consider. Tomorrow, the first ships equipped with his system would begin their trials. The Void Collective was about to discover that their perfect calculations were no match for human intuition unleashed at the speed of thought. Fleet Admiral Songmai watched the stars streak past the viewport of the ESS Venturist, Earth's first faster-than-light warship. A year had passed since the alien vessel had crashed on Mars, bringing both warning and hope to humanity. Now, looking at her bridge crew, a seamless mix of humans and Confederation personnel, she could hardly believe how far they'd come. "Status report," she called out, her voice carrying across the bridge. The holographic displays showed their fleet position. 30 ships, a mix of Earth and Confederation vessels, all modified with Heijun's revolutionary combat systems. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her executive officer responded. "The Void Collective forces are still retreating from the Centauri sector. This will be our 12th reclaimed star system." Songmai nodded, remembering the battles that had brought them here. Each victory had proven what the Confederation had first recognized in humanity. Their unpredictable nature was the perfect counter to machine logic. The Void Collective's perfect predictions meant nothing when faced with opponents who didn't follow predictable patterns. "Show me the tactical overlay," she ordered. The main display lit up with a three-dimensional map of the battlefield. The machine forces were falling back in perfect geometric formations, their movements as precise as ever. But that precision had become their weakness. "Launch the attack pattern," Song-Mei commanded. Her fleet moved forward, but not in any formation the machines could recognize. Each ship followed its own path, guided by the hybrid intuition systems that had changed the face of space warfare. She watched with pride as human and alien crews worked together, each complementing the other's strengths. Where Confederation warriors brought centuries of technical expertise, humans added the unpredictable element that threw the machines into disarray. Enemy fleet attempting to establish firing solutions, the tactical officer reported. Their targeting algorithms are failing to establish reliable tracking. Of course they were. The machines still hadn't adapted to facing opponents who didn't follow logical battle doctrine. Every time they thought they'd identified a pattern in human tactics, the pattern would dissolve, replaced by something entirely new. "Commence close-range operations," Song-Mei ordered. This was where human innovation truly shone. Their ships darted through the machine formation like schools of fish, each movement flowing naturally from the last but impossible to predict. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before the humans joined the war. Ships moved in ways that defied traditional space combat doctrine. Human intuition, amplified by Confederation technology, created strategies no tactical computer could anticipate. "The machine fleet is breaking formation," someone called out. Song-Mei allowed herself a small smile. Even after a year of facing human tactics, the Void Collective still couldn't adapt to an enemy that didn't think like machines.